All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to tackle dishonesty.
Ooh, interesting.
You bet. And we've got tons to unpack. We've got excerpts from Dan Ariely's audiobook, The Honest Truth About Dishonesty,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
plus some interviews he did with other researchers, ready to get into the nitty-gritty of why people cheat.
Absolutely. Always fascinated by that. And I think what's so interesting about Ariely's work is that, he doesn't just look at the big-time cheats. He's really interested in those everyday dishonesties, right? The stuff we all do.
Yeah, those little white lies, those moments where we fudge things just a bit.
Exactly. Like, where's that line? And how do we decide when to cross it?
Okay, so let's start with one of his experiments, just to get a feel for this.
Okay.
Imagine you walk up to a vending machine, put in your money, and get this. Not only does your candy come out, but your money comes back, too.
Oh, wow. Like a freebie.
Pretty much. So what do? Take the candy and run.
No. I like to think it, be honest, but
Right, but it's tempting, right?
totally.
Well, in the experiment, most people took a few extra candies, but they didn't clear the whole machine out.
Interesting. So they weren't totally greedy, right? Like they had some limits.
Yeah, it's like they felt justified, almost like they were making up for all the times the vending machine had cheated them in the past.
Oh, that's so true. You know those times when it just eats your money?
Exactly. But here's the kicker. Over half of the people in the experiment actually called their friends over to share the loot.
Wait, really? So it's not even just about them getting a little extra. They're actually bringing other people into it.
Yeah, and that's what I found so fascinating. It's almost like they need that social validation. Like if my friends are doing it too, it must be okay.
Like it's some kind of social proof. Makes you think, right?
Totally. Okay, so let's ramp things up a bit. Ariely also did this famous shredder experiment.
Oh, yeah, I've read about that one. Where people take a test and can cheat.
Exactly. They can cheat on the test and then shred the evidence. No one would ever know.
Sneaky. So how did they tempt people to cheat?
Well, there's a twist. In one version of the experiment, they had this actor pretending to be another participant. And this actor just blatantly cheated right in front of everyone.
Oh, wow. Setting a bad example.
Big time. And you know what? It totally worked. The real participants, the ones who weren't actors, they cheated way more when they saw someone else getting away with it.
It's almost like it gives permission, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, if they're doing it, I can too.
Exactly. Ariely actually called this the Madoff condition, named after that. Well.
Yeah, Bernie Madoff, the Ponzi scheme guy.
Exactly. So the idea is that seeing someone else cheat, especially someone we see as part of our group, can really lower our inhibitions.
Makes sense, I guess. We look to others for cues on how to behave.
All the time. And it makes you wonder how much our environment, the people we're with, are influencing our choices without us even realizing it.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, think about, like, peer pressure, or even just being in a workplace where everyone's cutting corners. It's going to have an impact.
Definitely food for thought. So we've seen how our sense of fairness, like getting back at the vending machine,
Right.
and our social groups, they can make us more likely to be dishonest.
Absolutely. But what about when we actually bring teamwork into the mix? Does that make things better or worse?
That's where things get even more interesting and maybe a little bit scary. Buckle up, because Ariely's research on collaborative cheating is mind-blowing.
So think about this. You're working on a project, right? With a teammate.
Okay, got it.
And there's, a chance to fudge the numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe make that progress report look a tad better than it actually is.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Would you be more or less likely to cheat in that situation compared to if you were working solo?
I think I'd probably be less likely, right? Having someone else there would keep me honest.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But Ariely found that people were actually more likely to cheat when they knew it would help out their teammate.
Wait, really? More likely. So they're basically betraying their own morals for the sake of the team.
It's kind of wild, right?
Yeah.
It's like this, he calls it altruistic cheating. That desire to help their teammate, even if it's a stranger, can actually outweigh their own moral compass.
So it's like, I'm not doing it for me, I'm doing it for the team, kind of a justification.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's for the greater good, which is scary because it explains how some of those big scandals happen.
Oh, totally. People get caught up in that, thinking they're doing it for the company, for the cause, whatever.
Right, and things spiral out of control.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets even more interesting. When teammates were like directly supervising each other, the cheating vanished.
Ah, so accountability matters. If someone's watching, we're less likely to stray. Makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. But with this stuff, When those same teammates were allowed to chat, become buddies, the temptation to cheat for the team, it came creeping right back.
Hold on. So if we like our teammates more, we're more willing to cheat for them.
It's complicated, right? It shows how teamwork, loyalty, and dishonesty all get tangled up. On the one hand, yeah, teamwork can bring out the best in us, but flip that coin over.
And it can bring out the worst.
Yep. Makes you think about how to, like, harness that team spirit without letting it, turn into something shady.
So we've got social influences at play, but let's get a little more personal. What about self-deception? We all do it, right? Telling ourselves those little white lies to feel better.
Oh, yeah, all the time. And Airily really dives into how self-deception fuels dishonesty. We're masters at convincing ourselves we're more honest than we really are.
It's like we create this bubble of denial where we can bend the rules without feeling too bad. Like, it's just a little cheat, no big deal.
Exactly. And he calls it the fudge factor. This idea that we can be a little dishonest as long as it doesn't totally wreck our self-image.
So there's this line we draw, even if it's a fuzzy one.
Exactly. We're all like, I'm not a bad person, just fudging things a little. And you see this everywhere, right? Credit card companies with those hidden fees, banks slowing down check processing.
Oh, yeah, they're not technically breaking the law, but they're definitely playing in that gray area.
Totally. It makes you wonder, is this fudge factor thing universal? Like, do people from different cultures have different sized fudge factors?
Ooh, that's a good question. Like, are some cultures more honest than others?
Well, Airily tested that using, get this, the beer index.
The beer index. Okay, now I'm intrigued.
It's basically a way to measure cheating using beer as the reward to keep things consistent across cultures.
Clever. So what did he find? Were there some clear winners in the honesty department?
Surprisingly, the cheating levels were pretty similar across all the cultures they studied.
Wow, so maybe deep down we're all kind of the same when it comes to temptation. But then why do we have such strong opinions about, like, some cultures being more dishonest than others?
It's not necessarily that some cultures are more honest overall. It's more about what specific actions they consider to be cheating. What's a big no-no in one culture might be a minor slip-up in another.
So it's more about cultural norms and expectations, not about some inherent honesty level.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it goes back to that fudge factor. Different cultures might have different tolerance levels for how much fudging is okay.
Makes sense. Our moral compasses are calibrated differently based on where we're from, which makes things a lot more complex, right?
Definitely. And reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to understanding and, combating dishonesty.
Okay, we've talked about social pressures, self-deception, but what about those times when our willpower just disappears? Like when we're exhausted and make choices we normally wouldn't.
Ah, yeah, the depletion effect. Our self-control is not limitless, right?
It's like a muscle that gets tired after a workout.
Exactly. Roy Baumeister's research shows that as we make decisions and resist temptations throughout the day, our willpower kind of runs out.
So by the end of a crazy day, we're more likely to give in to temptation, even if it means being dishonest. Just because we're mentally drained.
Exactly. And this has big implications, not just for us personally, but for, like, workplaces and stuff.
It makes you wonder if some of those big scandals, those bad decisions, might be partly due to decision fatigue.
Oh, for sure. Maybe if those folks who just gotten a good night's sleep, things would have played out differently.
It makes you think. Speaking of temptation, what about guilt? How does that feeling of, having done something wrong affect our behavior?
Guilt, man, it's powerful. It can make us apologize, try to fix things, but sometimes people try to deal with guilt in ways that don't really solve the problem.
Like how? What do they do?
Yoenbar did some research on this, found that when people were reminded of past wrongdoings, they were more likely to choose to receive electric shocks.
Whoa, hold on. Electric shocks. Like, they wanted to be zapped. Why would they do that?
It was like self-punishment, almost like they were trying to balance out the bad deeds with physical pain.
Wow, that's intense. Guess we don't always handle guilt in the most healthy ways, huh?
Nope. Sometimes it's more about making ourselves feel better than actually fixing the harm we've caused.
So we've gone deep into the dark side, explored how our social circles, our own minds, even being tired can lead us to cheat. It's a little depressing, honestly. Is there any hope? Can we actually become more honest?
Oh, there's definitely hope. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Early's research might show that we're all capable of cheating, but it also suggests that deep down, most people actually want to be good.
Okay, so we're not all doomed to be dishonest.
Not at all. It's kind of like a puzzle, If we understand how our minds work and the things that influence us, then we can figure out how to make better choices.
So instead of just lecturing people about ethics, we need to like create environments that encourage honesty.
Exactly. Make it easier to do the right
Okay,
thing.
I like that. So
Yeah.
what would that look like?
Well, one thing that works really well is using moral reminders at those key moments when we're tempted. Little things that kind of nudge us in the right direction.
Oh, you mean like those experiments with honor codes?
Yeah, exactly.
But
Just having people sign a statement saying they'll be honest can actually reduce cheating. It's wild.
it's amazing how powerful those little nudges can be, like a mental reset button.
Totally. And it doesn't have to be something super formal. It could be a picture of your family, a quote you like, or even just something that reminds you of, like childhood innocence.
I love that idea. So we've got these little nudges, but what about bigger changes, like in our workplaces or even in society as a whole? How do we make honesty more, I don't know, expected?
Well, one really important area is dealing with conflicts of interest. Those situations where our personal gain clashes with our, ethical obligations.
Right, like when someone's got to choose between doing what's right and, I don't know, making a buck. It happens all the time.
Yep, and those situations can be super tricky to navigate. We need to be aware of those conflicts and figure out how to minimize their influence.
So how do we do that? Any practical tips?
Transparency is huge. Just being open about potential conflicts of interest can make a big difference. It's like shining a light on those hidden motivations.
So they don't have as much power over us.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it might even mean stepping back from a situation entirely just to avoid the appearance of a conflict.
That makes sense. So transparency and maybe a little distance when needed. But what about the bigger picture, like the culture we live in? Can we make honesty more than just a good idea, but like the norm?
I think we can. We got to celebrate people who are honest. Show that doing the right thing can actually lead to good things.
Yeah. We need a contagious honesty movement.
Exactly. And that means speaking up when we see dishonesty, calling it out,
Yeah.
making it clear that it's not okay.
So we can't just be honest ourselves. We got to actively promote honesty in our communities and workplaces.
Right. It's about creating a culture where honesty isn't just the right thing to do, it's just what people do.
Wow, this has been such an insightful deep dive. We've covered so much, but it feels like we've just scratched the surface. What are your final thoughts for our listeners? What do you hope they take away from all this?
I hope they walk away feeling empowered. Like, even though we all face these temptations, we're not helpless. We can understand the things that influence us, make conscious choices, and really try to build a more honest world.
I love that. Knowledge is power, right? And we hope you, dear listener, will use this knowledge to make those powerful, honest choices in your own life.
And remember, even though we've been focusing on dishonesty, most people genuinely want to be good. It's
Mhm.
encouraging, right?
It really is. It's been fascinating and actually pretty hopeful to explore this whole idea of dishonesty. What do you think, listeners? What surprised you? What questions do you still have?
We're all in this together, figuring it out, learning and growing and trying to create a better world.
Until next time, keep diving deep.